Gracie Jiu-Jitsu rocks. Welcome to the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Rocks podcast, a podcast dedicated to Gracie Jiu-Jitsu and all things Gracie, including self-defense, competition, anti-bullying, women's self-defense and empowerment, nutrition, and most especially, the people involved in Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. This podcast is for the average Joe. It's for anyone who practices, trains, teaches, or just loves to talk about or hear about Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. We'll explore the lives of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu practitioners, how they got involved in the art, and what effect it's had on their lives. So buckle up and enjoy the ride. Welcome to episode 33 of the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Rocks podcast. As always, I'm your host, Marty Josie, and thanks for listening. So today is part 2 of our theme of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu and the older practitioner. If you haven't listened to part 1 on the last episode, I encourage you to do so. In that episode, we were focused more on practitioners that had started later in their life and had only been going maybe a couple of years. And in this episode, we're going to focus more on practitioners that have been involved in jiu-jitsu for a number of years. And further down the road on their journey, we'll speak to a number of black belts as well in this process and get their take on how getting older has affected their jiu-jitsu journey. So to get us started, I'd like to do some shout-outs to some people that I've been in contact or have been in contact with me, and for one reason or another, I wasn't able to actually do an interview with them, but I did wanted to acknowledge them just the same, so let's do that. Okay, first off is Geoff Bidoff, and as always, hopefully I'm saying your name right. Geoff started about a year ago at the age of 50. He studied Kung Fu for 3 years as well at that time, and says he loves to train BJJ. He travels extensively for his job, gets to train all over the world, places like Hawaii, Hong Kong, Chicago, California, Florida, Monterrey, Mexico, and Rio de Janeiro. So how cool is that? His home gym is Infinite MMA in Loveland, Colorado, which is a gym associated with Royce Gracie. So shout out to Geoff. Next person I'd like to shout out to is Dwight Triplett. And Don Cook, who is the head instructor of Metropolis Jiu-Jitsu Academy in Pontiac, Michigan, contacted me about Dwight. Dwight trained many years, about 15 years ago, at the original Gracie Academy. He says back when Henner was still a brown belt, and he used to fight back then and was very, very strong. He moved to Michigan and hadn't trained since until recently starting at Metropolis Jiu-Jitsu Academy. And Don Cook says that Dwight is an incredible man and doesn't care if he's 90 when he receives his black belt. He truly is a special person with a wealth of knowledge in Gracie Jiu-Jitsu and loves everything about Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. Okay, next we have Todd Fiat, who's 55, earned his purple belt in sport jiu-jitsu, and then attended a Gracie Jiu-Jitsu class, joined immediately, and started from white belt again, and he's currently a purple belt under Professor Guy Scuderi in the Valente brother system. So shout out to Todd. Also want to shout out to John Engalina, who's the head instructor of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Victor in Victor, New York. Recently turned 50. He's been in the martial arts for 30 years, and but has now dedicated his training and teaching to Gracie Jiu-Jitsu because he believes it has the greatest capacity to affect the greatest amount of people in the shortest amount of time. So, awesome, John. Keep up the good work. All right, next we have Jabril Alexander, who trains at Baltimore City Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. He's been training for several months and just got a stripe recently. So congratulations, Jabril, on that stripe. And his instructor is Nick Tissue, and that's Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Baltimore. So shout out to both of them as well. Next we have RJ, and that's all I have as far as the name. I only have initials, unfortunately, on that. So RJ trains at Chaos Martial Arts in Concord, New Hampshire. His instructor is John Sanders, and they're part of the BJJ Revolution team. And RJ says that there's a great group of guys and girls that where he trains, and they make it very easy for an old man to train and learn. And he grew up in Yokohama and Tokyo, Japan, and has a background in judo, as well as Shotokan karate and Kempo karate. So shout out RJ. Next we have Brian Tiura. I believe that's how you say the last name, Tiura. And Brian is a white belt who just entered his first submission-only competition last month and plans on doing another one next month. And to qualify himself as an older jiu-jitsu practitioner, he states that, quote, "I even have a bad back, gray hair, and a bald spot." So I love that. That's awesome, Brian. Thank you. Okay, we also have Rob Goodwin, Pastor Rob, who trains Gracie Jiu-Jitsu for a number of years and is currently 51 years old. He plans to keep training for many more years. And he's currently a blue belt in Gracie Jiu-Jitsu and has also recently been promoted as second-degree black belt in karate. So congratulations on that, Rob, and Pastor Rob, and well done. All right, next we have William Mitchell, and William's instructor, Carlos Diaz, in Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Destin, Florida, told me about William. He's got his blue belt in July of 2013. He's 67 years old. He has a black belt in Shotokan karate. And what makes him amazing is that he started training with two major medical conditions. He has titanium rods supporting his lower back and had a pacemaker for his heart. Last year, he had the pacemaker removed, which is amazing. He also plans to attend the instructor certification program through the Gracie Academy. So well done, William. Okay, and I don't want to forget Nico DeHaan, who was featured in episode 19, a full interview with him. I want to shout out to him. If you haven't heard that, it's very interesting, so make sure you listen to that. But Nico started training, I believe it's 62, might have been 63, and has had a very, very successful competitive career. And now at 70 years old is a black belt at Gracie Baja in Clearwater, Florida. Also heard from someone named Terry, and I don't have her last name, but she left me a voice message talking about how much she has enjoyed training jiu-jitsu and starting a little later in life. I plan to share that audio with you in the near future on another segment. So sorry I wasn't able to interview everybody, but I certainly enjoy the involvement. So appreciate your involvement and participation just the same. Okay, moving on. Let's hear from Steve Whittier of 40 Plus BJJ Success. All right, I'm speaking with Steve Whittier of 40 Plus BJJ Success. So welcome, Steve.
How you doing?
Doing well. Thanks for being here. So Steve is very tuned in to the demographic and the population of the older adult practitioner. So just wanted to ask you, Steve, about your input. What are the specific and unique needs of the older jiu-jitsu population?
Sure. Basically, I typically will break this down by the physical and then the psychological, and obviously there's a lot of intertwining of those two areas. But when we talk about the physical, when you hit 40, your body does start to change, right? And that's obviously a big spectrum of difference based on individuals and what type of shape they're coming into that age at and everything. But there are certain material realities there. So number one, we take longer to recover, and we are more sensitive to volume. Even though you may still be able to build up, you're in good shape, you can have a very intense training session, but volume will affect you differently. So what does that mean? That means that for older practitioners, typically, you're going to need to have more rest, literally in terms of how much sleep you get, and your nutrition and everything becomes more important, but also your frequency often gets affected just on a physical level. So where you have guys or those that are younger, maybe able to train 5-6 days a week consistently, you may find that you're having more trouble doing that, which means that you're logging less in terms of mat hours. Okay, so there's that part. Obviously, there's also a longer span to be able to recover from injuries, and injuries tend to rack up. And what I've noticed for sure over the years isn't just for people that have already been doing jiu-jitsu for years by the time they get into their 40s, 50s, and above, but who may have jiu-jitsu related injuries that are bothering them, but also people just from other activities and general wear and tear can start off and have pre-existing injuries factor in. So kind of across the board, those are a lot of the things that go on physically that not only can limit people and be considerations for how they approach training, but also can affect them psychologically. And then on the psychological side, you get a lot of sort of the unspoken types of things, or things that you have to dig in. And these are types of things that I've had many, many email conversations with people, private messages, kind of offline. Occasionally I've written about without mentioning names and things like that. But a lot of people who are older have frustration over this. The fact that these things, combined with the fact that as you get older, you tend to have more family and work responsibilities and things like that that are vying for your time. So they just can't keep up. And especially if they're in an environment that is very heavy on emphasis in terms of, sort of young athletic practitioners and competition related and things like that, sometimes the frustrations that can build up can be a lot, and then ultimately lead to somebody quitting, even if they're citing another reason for why they can't do it anymore. Right? So that certainly comes into play, and I like to personally be sensitive to that with my students, but also kind of have a forum created to be able to talk to people about kind of reframing their expectations or how they train and things like that. In other words, don't try and train like somebody who is 18 or 19 years old and does jiu-jitsu 6 days a week and does CrossFit 3 days a week and just basically lives on the mat. Right? You can't do what you're doing and train like that. Right? And then there's obviously varying degrees in there as well. And the other thing is that the social aspect I find is really important is how that will factor into where people feel that they fit in the school culture. And again, this varies greatly, but a lot of people will kind of feel like they're second-class citizens in the culture where it's this vibe where, like, oh, so-and-so is really cool for the older guy or woman, oh, good for that, but like it's sort of like a recycling of, school jockdom in the sense that everybody looks at the athletes, the ones who have the best performance on the mat is the cool kids. And even if they're not mean or maligning to the older people, they still aren't in that cool kids club. And sometimes, that does translate in a number of different ways. And that's also something I think it's that I always try and help people kind of through that. And also had a lot of feedback from instructors that have said, I never actually thought about that, and I think we have a pretty good atmosphere here, but I'm going to be more sensitive to that moving forward.
Yeah, that's great. That's great to keep in mind for sure. Well, great thoughts and insights, Steve, and we really appreciate you sharing that with us. If people want to know more about Over 40 BJJ success, how can they get more information about you and that?
Sure thing. If they want to Google 40 plus BJJ, 40 with the 40, and then the word plus BJJ online, they'll find a bunch of material that I have out there. And then if they specifically want to check out some of the series, 40plusbjjlive.com.
Wonderful. And the little bit I've checked out so far has been just outstanding. So highly recommend those products and materials.
Thanks very much.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much, and great health and long life.
Great. Thanks for talking to you.
And now I'd like to share a few thoughts written by Roy Harris. Roy Harris Jiu-Jitsu, and he's an unbelievable Jiu-Jitsu practitioner and instructor for many, many years. I have several of his DVDs, and one of them that I really appreciate is his BJJ Over 40. It's a really great DVD, so check that out. Here's what he has to say about a few important points about training Jiu-Jitsu for the over 40 crowd. Number 1, safety is your primary goal and objective. Make sure you stay focused on this. Fight the urge to, quote, just see if you can hang with the young guns. This also includes learning to say no to certain training partners. Number 2, enjoyment is your second goal. If you're not enjoying the journey, then it's only a matter of time before you hang up the towel and stop training. So take the time now to find out what brings you joy when you train. Number 3, your third goal is to find some tools of measurement so that you can make repeatable and measurable progress. Too often, students learn and train technique after technique. This mindset in training leads to frustration because it generally leads to the young guns game. So learn how to measure your progress. FYI, the tap is not a good tool of measurement. And you can find out more of Roy's thoughts at www.royharris.com. And Mr. Harris also has started a certification training for BJJ Over 40. And you can learn about that on his Facebook page at BJJ Over 40 Academy, or by going to www.bjjover40academy.com. Okay, I'd like to move now into some interviews, starting with a man named Frank Duffy. And this interview was, I unfortunately couldn't include it on the last episode, but it does fit into the category of someone starting a little later in life. So let's hear from Frank now. Next up, we're talking with Frank Duffy. So welcome, Frank.
Thank you, Marty. It's a pleasure to be here with you on this podcast to talk about my experience as an older Gracie Jiu-Jitsu practitioner. And I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. If you would just start by telling us your age, Frank, how long you've been training, and where you train.
I'm 66 right now. I started training in Gracie Jiu-Jitsu with Mike and Jordan Stewart almost 2 years ago at the age of 64. And prior to that, I had 11 years of Japanese Aikido and a year of Israeli Krav Maga. And I was also an Army Green Beret and an Army Ranger and a Green Beret combat diver. So I've always had an interest in the martial arts.
Yes. Sounds like you've got quite an interesting past.
It has been interesting, and I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Excellent. All right, so what inspired you to get started, at least in Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, a little later in your life?
Well, like I said, I've always had an interest in the martial arts, and after 11 years of Aikido, I reached the rank of, it was equivalent to a brown belt. But the style of Aikido I practiced emphasized a lot of the, what they call ki, or chi. And not only did you have to demonstrate the technical aspect of the art, but also they expected you to do what they called extend the ki, or the chi. Mm-hmm. Oh, that was so subjective. It really bothered me that every time I do the techniques correctly, but I wasn't extending the ki. So I said, okay, I had enough of this. So then I did a year of Krav Maga with my son, and got a shoulder injury doing that. And I don't know if you ever tried Krav Maga, but it's the practice sessions are pretty intense. And so it was during one of those practice sessions that I landed square on my shoulder point and got an AC joint sprain. So I was out of commission for about 6-7 months with that. And then I started to become interested in getting back into something. So I took a complementary jiu-jitsu class with another instructor over in Columbia, Maryland. His teaching style and me just didn't get along. But I still had an interest in jiu-jitsu. I've had a long-term interest in it. So one day I was at the Roots Whole Foods market here in Clarksville, and I came out and there was a handwritten note on my windshield. And the handwritten note said, hi, we're having a seminar by Hiram Gracie next week. If you can make it, come on over. And it was signed Mike. Well, then I went looking for where this place was. Well, here it was only like 2 miles from my house. It was Mike Stewart. And he had seen the Gracie triangle logo sticker on the back of my truck. And so he put that handwritten invitation on my windshield. That impressed me.
Yeah, that's great.
So I called him. I told him who I was. He said, come on over. I'll give you a free lesson. So he gave me a 1-hour free lesson. I really liked his teaching style. He rolled with me for a little bit, and I quickly learned how to be humble. And this guy is very skillful, and got me hooked. And he told me what I could sign up for a 10-day free trial. So I don't want a 10-day free trial. Just sign me up right now. So that was about almost 2 years ago, and so that's how I got involved with it. It was nice. It was because of a shoulder injury in Krav Maga.
How about that? That's great. It's great. Great story. It's good to hear how it all kind of took place. So far, what would you say has been the best part about training?
For me, as an older practitioner, the best part about it is learning that even though my strength has somewhat declined from what it used to be, and my speed and my agility is somewhat less than what it used to be, I can still do this stuff. And even though I might not be able to tap somebody out who is younger and stronger than me, they can't tap me out either. And so, I can do a lot of defense and practice a lot of defensive techniques and survive the fight, so to speak. And that impresses me about this. You don't have to be a super strong, super speedy, super agile person. You can do these techniques and be as old as I am.
Yeah, and it sounds like you've got a lot of wisdom from your life experience and everything you've been through, and that you just brought that into this arena and have a very good outlook as far as the training.
Yeah, thank you. I learned a long time ago that there's always somebody bigger, always somebody stronger, always somebody more skillful. So be careful how you talk to them. Don't talk down to people. Don't condescend. Don't go into a training experience with a chip on your shoulder thinking you're the toughest guy on the mat. I learned that a long time ago. And that's the attitude I take to this is, I'm here to learn. You might be younger than me, but you're more skillful than me. You might be faster than me, but you can teach me what you know. And so I take it all in as best I can. And actually getting tapped out once in a while keeps you humble,
Absolutely. Well, I certainly salute and applaud your viewpoint and your philosophy there. What's been the biggest challenge in starting a little later into the jiu-jitsu realm?
Well, I think I've thought about this a lot, actually, Marty. And the biggest challenge for me hasn't been the declining strength. The biggest challenge is the lack of agility. and the flexibility. It's just not as much as it used to be. So, yeah, trying to make some of these moves we do in the sweeps, or you're trying to pass the guard, trying to do them skillfully and quickly enough to make them work has been challenging for me. So, I do some private training sessions with some of the instructors, and that's one of the things that I'm working on, is how to modify jiu-jitsu to fit my body type and my age. Which is, by the way, another reason why I like jiu-jitsu so much is you can modify the techniques to fit your body type and who you are as an individual.
Absolutely. It's a beautiful thing about it, for sure. So, is there anyone that you would like to just give a shout-out to before we close?
Well, my instructors, Mike Stewart and his brother Jordan, Kyle Spindiff, who is one of our black belt instructors, Mike Johnson, another black belt instructor that works with us. He's a Howard County policeman here in Maryland. And there's one other person, I'm trying to think of his name. I may think of him in a second before I sign off here. But those are the guys I work with and get training from. And it's Tony Waldecker. That's the other fellow I work with, and he's an awesome guy. I'll tell you, and the techniques he shows us are not part of the Gracie curriculum. They're ones that are extracurricular, so to speak. And man, he is an awesome instructor. Black belt with, I think, 3, maybe 4 white stripes on his belt.
Nice. Well, it sounds like you're in good hands and in a great environment to flourish, to grow, but also to give back kind of from your years of experience.
Thank you.
Not even related to jiu-jitsu, just your vast knowledge of other things. Well, I appreciate you letting us get to know you a little bit and giving us a little glimpse into your life, Frank, and it's been a pleasure. I wish you nothing but a long, happy life ahead, sir.
Thank you, Marty. And next time you're up this way for a Highland or Henner seminar, make a point of looking me up on the mat and saying hi. I'd like to meet you.
Absolutely. Sure will. Okay, up next is Richard Bresler, and Richard has been around in jiu-jitsu for a very long time. I believe he was Rorion Gracie's original full-time student. So welcome, Richard.
Well, thank you.
My goal is to have Richard back in the near future for a full episode and get a in-depth interview about his start in jiu-jitsu and the whole journey throughout his lifetime. But for today's purposes, since you've been involved in jiu-jitsu for so long, Richard, how has getting older affected your relationship with jiu-jitsu?
It's just changed the way that I move on the mat. I have a much more defensive approach, and I'm more interested in protecting myself than I am about attacking. So if I'm rolling, I'll look for something, but it's out of defending myself first, and it's actually changed the way that I teach, because when I was younger, I used to, being a lighter guy, I'd play the bottom a lot, and being stacked up when someone's in your guard, and going for a triangle or arm locks, and I was comfortable staying on my upper back and neck for a decent period of time, and I don't like to do that anymore, just because it creates problems. As we get older, I never thought when I was younger what it was going to be like in 20 or 30 years. So it's changed the way that I teach, because I try to help people avoid playing that game.
I don't think you're alone in not thinking about, the future 20, 30 years ahead, because most of us don't have that kind of, insight when we're young. But so partly out of necessity, in order to avoid injuries, you switch more to that defensive mindset and games.
Yes, absolutely.
So how old are you, out of curiosity, sir?
63.
63. All right. So obviously you have to play more patience and more defense. Any other way that it's affected you, just kind of in your physical attributes?
Well, I don't have, I was never super fast, but whatever speed I had is, the reaction time goes away. A lot of things, they just, everyone just goes, oh, age is a state of mind. Yeah, right. It's easy to say that until you get to be older, And, and I see guys that are younger than me that are, kind of like guys in their, 40s and 50s that I talk to, and they just say, yeah, it's they go, oh man, recovery is so hard when you get up to be 40. And I'm like, you have no idea.
You're like, 40? What are you talking about?
Yeah. So, I mean, we just have to, like I said, defensively, it's recovery, and, and like your mind is thinking about certain things, but the reaction time is just gone. Or it's not gone, it's just a lot slower. And I remember, I think Henner Gracie put something out on YouTube a couple months ago about what happens to, because they were talking about, I forgot the guy's name, John Boyd.
Yep.
Who
John
died.
Boyd.
And he was saying he used to go to Henner, I think, and just say, it's like, I rolled with this purple belt or something, and I couldn't tap him, and, and it's, guys are tapping him, and, and I realized that, and then that's where he made a comment about, if the guy's after the age of 40, depending on how much you train, I mean, you're actually kind of going to lose a belt level for every 10 years after the age of 40 as far as effectiveness.
Yep, he calls that the Boyd belts.
Yeah. So, and and it's kind of, it's a little hard. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, Chris Saunders, who's, one of Hickson's first black belt. And Chris is 10 years younger than me, and he was just saying that, you really have to, it tests your ego, because you have to.
And that's exactly what I was about to ask you, coming from just a psychological perspective. How hard, as far as the ego, how hard a pill was that to swallow, that things just aren't, as quick as they used to be, and you can't play the same kind of game as you did when you were very young?
Well, it gets easier every day, because it's the reality. At first, when it happens, though, you kind of go like, wow. You don't want to do it. You think if you train harder or whatever. But, it's...
It is the reality, right?
Yeah, it's a reality. I was never really a competitor. I mean, I did, back when I was around, we didn't have huge competitions, and I wasn't interested in that anyhow. I was more interested in the self-defense aspect of jiu-jitsu. But I still sparred, a decent amount, but I really stopped hard sparring when I got into my late 30s. I kept getting, injured. So, when I spar, I wanted to spar with guys that were controlled and, that I know that I wasn't going to get hurt.
Yeah, I can certainly appreciate that. It's definitely where I'm at, in this point of my journey. I also want to respond to the age is just a number thought. It is a popular thing to say, and I used to say it a lot. And I want to believe that, and I do to a certain extent. But then there's the reality of, as you get older, things are different. You have to warm up more. Your recuperation, it takes longer. It's just not, you don't bounce back near as fast from a hard session, things like that. So, I want to keep my mind youthful thinking and that youthful philosophy, but at the same time, it is a reality that things do change. And I believe if you acknowledge it and work with it, you're going to be a lot better than just trying to deny it.
Well, Mike, because I'm around, the average age of most of my students is probably half of my age. So being around younger people helps the mindset. It's made a lot of useful thinking. It's just that things that, I show them how to do things that I can't do anymore, and they can pull them off, which is, rewarding.
Sure.
to be able to see, knowing that, because I was able to show them, I could transfer the knowledge. So it's kind of like, a father with their kids, if they were never really, I've taught people how to do better sweeps than I ever did. And I'm like, damn, that. So I kind of take pride in that instead of my, thinking about what I can't do anymore.
That's a great way to look at it.
Well, I had such excellent teaching because of being the first, and when, the first week that Horian and I lived together back in 1980, his father and Hickson and Carlos Gracie Jr. came and spent a week with us, just to be around that, and also to be, I spent a decent amount of time around, having privates with Horian and quite a few with Hickson, a couple with Hoyler. I had a lot of knowledge to, as far as how to pass it along. And because especially my main teacher being Horian, it's kind of like I have specialized in taking the person that knows nothing and then have them start. It's like a lot. I walk around different places, tournaments or whatever, which I don't really go to very often. But people come up to me and they go, "Oh, you were my first teacher." And like, "Oh, you got me excited about jiu-jitsu." I hear that so much, and I make sure that not only, because I have excitement for it, so it's passed on. But I always make sure that that they have a great foundation when they go anyplace else. I've taught people that don't. I've had guys come over from different places, that knew all these fancy stuff, but they couldn't pull it off. And then they spent 6 months with me, and they could start pulling off the moves because they could set them up better. They had certain foundational moves better, and that's one of the things that being around, the Gracies, and especially, Horian, that's just helped me to impart that knowledge because he's such a great teacher.
Awesome. And we'll stop there with that part of your story, and we'll just let that serve as a teaser for the next time we can get together. So thank you so much for sharing your short insights on your journey as you get a little older in jiu-jitsu. Really appreciate it, Richard. Thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay, I'm now speaking with Eric Silver. And Eric's been training for a great number of years and is a Hickson Gracie black belt. So welcome, Eric.
Thank you very much.
And Eric owns an academy in Nashville, Tennessee. So Eric, tell us the name of your school, how old you are, and how long you've been training, please, sir.
My school here is Zanshin Dojo, and we have a few other affiliates. Nashville is the primary school, and then we have schools in South Georgia and Alabama, Mobile, Alabama, and Franklin, Ohio. I started training in 1971, and I was 9 years old. I'm 52 now. Started, ironically, in judo and transitioned through karate and aikido and until jiu-jitsu, which I started with Hickson in 94. So I've been with Hickson now for 21 years.
Nice.
And interesting journey because we're similar ages, and so we've gotten to experience what happens with you physically and mentally as you train over the years.
And what a great opportunity that is to have been associated and with Master Hickson for so many years. That's great. Since you've been involved in doing jiu-jitsu for so many years, Eric, how have things changed for you, as you've gotten older?
Well, I think when you're training in martial arts, it's similar to kids growing up. The longer you're around, sometimes I think you think more about your actions and then the results that you're going to get from those actions. I think as we get older, we tend to start practicing and training certain ways that we wish we had started earlier, doing things a little bit more safely, not risking as much. I've been pretty fortunate in jiu-jitsu, aside from incidental things, a broken toe, mat break, or a rib fracture, something like that. I did have a serious neck injury trying to escape a clock choke one time, and that was my big call to reality, to realize that my body was human and that injuries could happen to the extent that it could limit, if not stop you from training. And I believe that there's an interesting phenomenon in jiu-jitsu because I came from traditional martial arts, Aikido, Goju karate, Wado karate. And in those martial arts, the masters tend to be in their older years, 70s and 80s and up. And in jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, there tends to be the trend to train with, or to want to train with world champions. And world champions are generally in their 20s. So there's a difference because you can't expect the 84-year-old master to physically be able to pull off what the 22-year-old world champion did. So sometimes I believe the student has to look inside at what they want out of the experience. There's a very good expression that one of my karate instructors used to say, which was, masters are too old to be champions. And there's some value in what I try to teach, which I feel like is what Rickson taught me, is to survive the game. If you tap someone, it's excellent and you feel good. If you don't, you survive and you work the situation to the best of your ability. And if you, in the end, you tap, you learn something from the experience. But something that I learned the hard way is more the value of tapping as opposed to the value of just surviving without any purpose. You end up, with cauliflower ear, you split your lip, you break a tooth, you hurt your neck, all of which I've done. I've always been a little more flexible than the average man. So I took a lot of getting stabbed on my neck because it, quote unquote, didn't hurt. And then realized years later that there's herniated discs, there's arthritis, there's 3 or 4 pretty badly chipped teeth. So I try to pass on to the students now, it's a phrase that Huron said once when he was teaching at my place, which was it worth it? And I think that's a tough one for us to look at the situation and, say, hey, I didn't tap, but I can't chew. Or
right.
I tapped and, I wish I'd done better. And I think it's our jobs as instructors to let everyone understand that the tapping is not a loss. The tapping is a part of your experience. And as you get better, you'll tap less, and you'll tap others more. I've gotten to a point where if I see a student or I see the person I'm sparring with in trouble, I want to let go. I don't want to put them at the point where they have to make the decision, do I pop my ankle or not? And so sometimes we can say, hey, in this position, your ankle's pretty vulnerable, so we're going to sit up and restart, or we're going to put your leg in a better position so you don't hurt yourself. And some people, consider that sort of, it feels like you're playing down to them, but in time people generally will thank you. And I want to see my students have a life in an art like I have. For me, it's been so far 43 years, and I enjoy in training now much more than ever. But there's certain things I'm just not going to do. I'm not going to take a choke on the chin or inside my lips or hold a grip so tight that I sprain a finger trying to keep the grip. It's just not worth it. And Rickson many times said to me, when I thought I was doing a good job, why are you gripping so hard? Why are your arms giving up? Because you're trying too hard. You're just overdoing it. And it's tough to see when you're in the moment, in the heat of the moment. But with time, you will start to recognize it. And a lot of people say, I wish I had started younger. I wish I had started when I was 20, whatever. But I think it's not important. I think two things important, that you start and that you stay. The rest,
yes,
you can't control it. We can't control our fates and destiny. We can't turn it back. So we get out of it, what we need to get out of it. The thing that I've discovered over a few decades of instructing is that when you're training, when you're quote unquote fighting, your inner personality comes out. Whatever it is, it will come out. So I think there's no greater gift in the training. You could spend, $3,000 a year in therapy, or you might do jiu-jitsu and start realizing what some of your demons are, because they're going to come out in your training.
Right.
And to me, that's far more important than anything else, because you start improving who you are. And I think your martial arts get better no matter what if you're training. And if you stay healthy, then you train more and you get more results. I don't think that people should tap just because they are technically uncomfortable. Oh, there's pressure on my neck, tap. But
right.
you have to learn to put a little more value on, is this position dangerous to either of you, me or the other guy? And sometimes for me, it's important as an instructor to stop the action and say, hey, let's stop right now, because what you're doing is dangerous to me. You have grabbed my little pinky toe and it's going to break off, so let's not do that. And let everyone see by example that sometimes you need to put both of you in a better and safer position to continue. Some people, I think, I saw an article recently with someone talking about jiu-jitsu becoming weak and people training light, and I highly disagree, because it's incredibly important for us to learn to run our body in jiu-jitsu through all the gears. First,
that's
second,
a great way to put
fourth,
it.
Or you get where you need fifth gear. That's fine, go there. But you don't drive the car in fifth gear all the time, or you burn the engine
Wow, that's
up.
great. Great way to put it. I love that insight. And you said a number of things that are really great insights and food for thought. I love the reference to the Hiron quote on "Was it worth it?" and also bringing your karate experience and insight into it is really great. What was the phrase you said? Masters are too old to be champions. Yeah, it's great to hear the difference, kind of the different attitude in arts like karate and jiu-jitsu. Thank you very much for taking your time and sharing your thoughts and insights and wisdom with us. Appreciate it very much, sir.
Pleasure.
All right. I hope to be visiting you at your school in Nashville and sometime in the near future.
Great.
Okay, up next is Brian Orovets. And Brian started a Facebook group called BJJ for Old Guys, which is quite popular and continues to grow daily. So welcome, Brian.
Thank you, Marty.
And since you've been in the game for quite a number of years, Brian, just share with us, if you would, what, if anything, has changed for you related to jiu-jitsu.
I got to tell you, it has definitely been a journey. I've heard a phrase said about judo that I think also applies to jiu-jitsu, is that you leave jiu-jitsu, jiu-jitsu never leaves you, and that's certainly been the case, because I've taken a break over the years, but have come back to it. And in that time, what I've seen is that it has truly grown to a sport where it can become a lifestyle, to where it applies for a lot of aspects of one's life, but more in depth as far as the actual physicality of the art itself is, you've seen guys that have tried to create jiu-jitsu to beat jiu-jitsu with some of these inverted guards and the 50-50s, and I think that some of the basics and the fundamentals that serve so well have to some degree fallen by the wayside a little bit, and being an old guy, pushing 45 here, I've seen that what really does work is the fundamentals. And whereas we may not have the necessarily the speed anymore that some of the younger guys have, we do have the I guess maybe the experience of years and wisdom to know what's coming next, and for us to be able to focus on the fundamentals and timing has really been extremely helpful at this age. So I think that the art's grown to be technical in the extreme, yet it's still got its foundations that are grounded. So it's very pure. It is very, very pure, and it's very healthy, as you know, because you've been at it for a while yourself. And it has evolved and come full circle. I got into it in 1995, 1996, and it's certainly come full circle. So it's kind of like that Mobius continuum. It's it evolves and stays the same. It evolves and stays the same. So it's been fascinating to watch.
Yeah, I like the way you put that. It evolves and stays the same. So it's so many aspects are the same, but there's always something new to experiment and play with too. But I like how you said, the real emphasis or where the real foundation should be is the basics.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And that they serve you really well.
Absolutely.
So what advice would you have for, let's say, an older person thinking about starting, or someone who has just been in it for a long time but is getting older now?
Take it slow. I've talked to a lot of the older guys that have come to the Facebook page and then come to in the community, because you know how this goes. You've been around for a while. You talk to people, but take it slow. And I think at when you get some age and wisdom on you, sometimes it's easy to check your ego at the door, and that's more important now than ever for somebody that's older approaching this. Because without fail, one of the first questions that I get is, should I do this? Because I'm old. And you're not really that old. And there's some scientific studies out there that state that, with a good diet and a good lifestyle, and if you warm up properly, even if you get into your 40s, that's actually a pretty darn good time for you to develop some new muscle and tendon strength, that old man strength. It's a cliche for a reason. It's real.
Right.
So I just get in there, warm up, check your ego at the door, start slow, and just find those 3 to 5 basics that, for every situation, for your inside, have those moves you can always go to. Find your guard, the things that works for you. Just take it easy and just take small things. Don't try and take it all in at once, because you know how this goes. We get these. You can become a BJJ geek real quick, and you're buying the 50 gis and watching every YouTube video you can get. But so just try and avoid that. But watch, and see what people are doing. But find those basics that work. And biggest thing is probably check the ego at the door.
That's such a big thing, and for so many of us, sometimes it's easy to do, and sometimes it's a work in progress for sure. But that is such a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
It determines, how your whole experience is going to be, for sure.
Absolutely.
I love how you were speaking about, even on into your 40s or above, how, it doesn't mean it's over.
That's right.
As far as physically. I mean, there are physical changes as well as, psychological changes that we tend to go through, but it doesn't have to define how we age. So much of our society ages because of the way they think that they're supposed to age, mm-hmm. and that psychological mindset and the examples around them and who they spend their time with, etc. So I love hearing about and seeing examples of people, not even just in BJJ, but especially in that are getting older, but are better than ever in many respects, and certainly aren't out of the game, but reaching new levels in their own right.
For sure. And it's and it makes you think differently, in your outside life, and it makes you think differently even on the mats. And I think you and I both agree that Roy Harris is a fantastic example of somebody that can really point the way for a lot of older guys and young guys too. Which maybe that's a bad thing, because if they pick up on the old guy tricks, I think we lose the advantage of old age and treachery over youth and skill to a degree. But the way you distribute your weight, and and maybe the way I think one of my prevalent examples that I end up using for myself is how I'm dealing with the spider guard. The guys that are their legs are out there, crazy legs, they're fast, but it becomes more a little bit more of a pressure and leverage type game. It's a little slower, but you immobilize that guy, and then so you just, what it comes down to is you just have to think differently, which is great because physically your body's changing, mentally your body's changing, and again, you're bringing that wisdom of being older. And if you're an older guy and you're still practicing BJJ, great, you're bringing the wisdom and years of experience to that. But it just makes you think differently. And to your point, I think it's fantastic that it does apply to, how we live our lives. So for an old guy or an old girl, it's probably one of the most healthy things a person can do because it changes you and it makes you get back out in life, and the sun shines brighter, work's not as bad because, hell, your BJJ training can be the hardest thing you do all day. So, work can't be all that bad. But now, as you and I found out, work can be a hassle logistically, but the stress is not there. And it's probably one of the biggest and most wonderful things I've ever done to kind of keep stress levels down, and really makes you enjoy life a lot more. And I think it's one of the points behind BJJ, ultimately.
Well said, my friend. Well said. There's no way it can't just carry over and spread into all parts of your life, and that's one of the most awesome and beautiful things about it, for sure.
It is. It really is.
Any other quick thoughts?
I would encourage every guy out, every old guy, old girl out there, get out there, find somebody to work with. There's check out the schools in your area. They're more than welcome to reach out to me, and I'm sure you probably get more than your fair share of questions, but it's a fantastic way to live life, and I would love to see more people of age get out there and give it a try and try the community. So
absolutely,
yeah, I appreciate the opportunity.
And Brian, absolutely, tell us where you train, and also if anybody wants to find you on your Facebook site or get in touch with you, how they would do that.
Sure. I am currently training at Tiger Academy in Alpharetta, Georgia. Certainly, stop by BJJ for Old Guys on Facebook. It's pretty easy to find there. I've got an email address attached to it. But people find themselves in Atlanta. I also have mats in the house, and have been around a while. So if somebody's looking for a school, again, being around since '96, I probably know most of the people in the game and have a pretty good Rolodex. So I'd love to help anybody that's trying to find a place to train, or if they just want to talk about it on the phone, an email, or chat, whatever. So I definitely will evangelize for BJJ all the time.
Right on. Well, thanks a lot, man, for giving us your insight and sharing your knowledge and experience with us. I really appreciate it, Brian.
Likewise, I appreciate the opportunity myself.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, next I'd like to share something from Steve Maxwell, and I really like this. It's called Jiu-Jitsu and the Mature Athlete. As a man ages, he needs to get wiser in how he uses his body. Eventually, everyone declines as aging sets in. The biggest mistake I see is middle-aged men trying to compete and train like they did when they were younger. Even worse is comparing their performances from their younger days to the present day and the feelings of disappointment in the disparity. This will always be a source of frustration. No one can continue to dominate forever. You must acquire the grace to feel satisfaction in the moment. Improvements for the man over 45 will be subtle. The days for big gains and big strides are over. Improvements will come in other ways than increased physical prowess. Thankfully, the mental game continues to improve forever. Things like learning to quickly relax, better breath control, reducing panic in uncomfortable situations, trickery, and of course, not hesitating to tap just as soon as you get caught. Struggling and fighting out of submissions is a young man's game and beneath the mature athlete. What's important for the older BJJ practitioner is to immediately acknowledge his mistake in getting caught in a submission hold in the first place. Simply tap and continue playing. Many upper belts are loath to submit to a lower rank. This is another ego trap that will end in pain and injury. A large, strong, athletic blue belt will give an old black belt a really hard time. So it's important to face this and not be afraid of tapping, early and often. Another suggestion is that you stop competing with your students. Be extremely selective with whom you train. Have a few trusted students you work with, and stop rolling with really heavy guys. Their extra weight makes it easy for you to get injured. When you train, restrain the urge to dominate. Destroy your need to constantly prove yourself or your assumed superiority. It's an ego trap. When sparring, see how little energy you can expend. Use only about 25% of your strength most of the time. Play a lot of defense. Forget your concerns about position. Some guys fight tooth and nail to prevent someone from passing their guard, as if it's a tournament or a competition. Forget all of this competition-style training. Instead, refine your game to be playful and relaxed. Enjoy working the bottom and playing defense as much as working on top. Make your objective about timing, setup, trickery, etc. Quit sparring for short matches and instead wrestle continuously for 20 to 30 minutes at a slow, relaxed pace. Your body should feel fantastic when you finish, never beat, sore, or abuse in any way. In fact, you should feel like you could have done more. I repeat, forget the competition game. Master Helio Gracie once told me that modern competition jiu-jitsu is the anti-jiu-jitsu. The sport game is a form of jacketed wrestling, which places a premium on speed, power, and stamina. This was fun when I was younger, but I realized it isn't the proper milieu for the older athlete. Genuine jiu-jitsu requires none of those things, because real jiu-jitsu isn't competitive. This is why the majority of the time should be spent training with good white and blue belts. They are more like what you'd run into in a true street fight. Learn to relax and trick them without using power. This is a fun game. And if it's not fun, then you shouldn't do it. Yeah, I really like that. From Steve Maxwell, who's in his 60s and in phenomenal shape. Really, really good words to digest and live by. And Steve was featured on an earlier edition of the show, so if you haven't checked that out, make sure you do so. You can find out more about Steve at www.maxwellsc.com. Okay, next I'd like to play an excerpt from a video called Jiu-Jitsu Over 40, 5 Rules to Roll to 90, from Henner and Hiron Gracie. Played one clip in the last episode, and this clip speaks specifically about something known as the Boyd belts. So let's check it out now. And then we'll do the Make a Difference, Make an Impact segment.
Rule number 1, know your Boyd belts. We have a very good friend, instructor of the Gracie Academy, black belt, who recently passed away a few years ago. His name was John Boyd, and the coolest guy you could ever imagine. He was 66 years old and was just totally exceptional human being on and off the mat. Everyone's motivation. You came to the mat. When you saw John rolling that day, you were like, yeah, I want to be like him when I get older. Like, straight up, he was the man, you know? And John was a black belt. And there were many times in his later years that John started around 40, 50, 60, around 45, mid-40s, and trained until mid-60s, so almost 20 years. And John would come to my office as a black belt and say, Henner, man, you know, I roll with a younger kid today, you know, mid-20s, younger blue belt, and I couldn't beat him.
Like, he let you down.
Yes, that's like, what the tone was. I'm a black belt, he was a blue belt, and I couldn't beat him. I said, who was it? And he gave me the name of the guy, and the guy was like 220. John's 160. The guy's 220, 60 pounds heavier at least, and 40 years younger. But just about the weight alone is ridiculous. Yeah. And because of John and seeing the challenge he was having with comprehending why a black belt like him couldn't just annihilate a blue belt or any blue belt, I began kind of exploring this idea that, and to me holds very true, that size matters, weight matters, strength matters. All these things are factored into someone's ability. Age matters in considering someone's threat to you in a physical altercation. And the scale we've come up with is just to make it very simple to understand is, and I told this to John, I said, John, every 20 pounds equals a belt. and every 10 years equals a belt. So let's just say they were the same age. It was John and another 60-year-old who weighed 220 pounds. And John was 160. This guy's a 60-pound advantage, which means what? 20, 40, 60, which means blue becomes purple, brown, black. Do you understand? Belt, belt, belt. 60 pounds, 3 belts. So a guy who's a blue belt at 220 is a black belt to John Boyd at 160. That's assuming they're the same age.
Yeah, and what that means is that when they roll, it'll be like that difficult. As difficult as John beating a 60-year-old black belt who's his same weight.
Who's been training as long as he has.
Doesn't
very
mean
sharp.
John can't win in the end, or that the guy's going to have the technique that will, submit John, but John might be stuck underneath him. He might be so tired at the end of that roll. So it's very true. And even us,
for us,
we have sometimes, whether it's a police officer or a soldier or just an average kid, an athlete,
comes in athletic,
and they're 285 pounds, 300 pounds football player, and we might
and there's no belt. This is a 0 belt.
It might take us sometimes 8 minutes.
Yes.
To beat this guy.
Yep.
Who's stronger than anybody that we know, and it takes 8 minutes sometimes for me to beat you or you to beat me.
Yes.
So we give that football player black belt status.
Yes.
Now, are they really a black belt in technique? No. Do they know jiu-jitsu? No.
What's a good historically sound example of this? Look at Eli versus Kimura. Look at more targeted Hoist versus Dan Severn.
There you go.
15 minutes to submit the beast. And he was a 0 belt in jiu-jitsu. Let him know 1 choke, 1 rear naked, 1 guillotine, 1 footlock. He'd never done a submission in his life. And Hoist took 15 minutes to beat the guy. Why? He was 270. That's 100 pounds heavier than Hoist. So 100 pounds means white, blue, purple, brown, black, 20, 40, 60, 80, 100. Right? So he was basically toe-to-toe with Hoist for 15 minutes. Hickson versus Zulu. Zulu was not a jiu-jitsu practitioner. Yeah. He was a savage beast of a guy who just freaking went crazy against young Hickson. And Hickson took a good, I don't know how exactly, maybe 10, 12, 13 minutes to beat this guy. So it was a couple rounds, right, of 10 minutes. Moral of the story is what? Even at our peaks, we acknowledge the Boyd belt system, which is someone who is younger or stronger or heavier has an advantage. Now, some are saying, well, that's crazy because, I thought jiu-jitsu was good against people of all sizes. Well, that's exactly the point. Why do we train? To neutralize the Boyd belts of society. Because everyone is born and has what we call the natural jiu-jitsu, which is their natural athleticism. And a lot of times as you get older in jiu-jitsu or you're smaller and you're going to get someone, much heavier or much younger, much more athletic, you think, no, I'm a black belt, I got to beat them. No. If you're a black belt and you're 40 years older and they're a blue belt, but they're your same weight and they're 40 years younger, and you can roll with them for 5 minutes and nobody gets tapped, or you get tapped 1 time in 5 minutes against this blue belt, guess what? You're amazing. Can we emphasize this any stronger, and are we good?
I think we're good.
Okay, time for the Make a Difference, Make an Impact segment. Let's start with a quote. Only those who have learned the power of sincere and selfless contribution experience life's deepest joy, true fulfillment. Tony Robbins. So let's visit the notion of contribution and giving back. If you've lived life for many years, and or if you've been in jiu-jitsu for many years, you have the unique opportunity to give back to those that are younger or those who have less experience in jiu-jitsu and in life. So I want to encourage you to look for and be aware of opportunities to do so, to give back. If you're in a formal teaching position, that of instructor, what ways are you, besides your formal teaching, what ways are you recognizing the opportunity to give back to the students in your life? Are there students with unique needs, and are you recognizing that? For example, if you have taught a certain technique and then your students are paired up and you find one student is having trouble learning a technique, instead of just making the corrections verbally and telling that student what to do as they're with their partner, step in and be that partner for a couple moments and let them actually feel the correct way to do something. It's just one other way of filling in the gaps for that student. So this is just one example. But if you are in that formal position, go ahead and look for ways that you can reach your students in a unique way, and look for ways of giving back. If you're not in a formal teaching position, what ways can you give back and contribute to those younger and or less experienced? Maybe take someone under your wing, maybe be a mentor to somebody. In either case, there are always opportunities if we look for them. And if we commit to giving back to those in our lives and making the contribution to them, we're going to feel a lot more fulfillment in our lives and a much deeper sense of joy. So going through your day, your week, your month, I'd like to encourage you just to look for and be aware of ways that you can give back and contribute. Use that life experience, use your jiu-jitsu experience to make a difference in somebody else's life. And that's going to do it for this edition of the show. As always, I really do appreciate you listening, and I certainly appreciate your feedback. It's really great to hear from those that are listening and enjoying the show. Love your suggestions. I love your comments. Keep them coming. If you haven't liked us yet on Facebook, please do so. You can just do a search for Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Rocks Podcast. You can also follow us on Twitter, as well as rate us on iTunes, and leave a comment there as well if you'd like. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, this is Marty Josie, and I'll see you on the mat.